Well, we've been hearing about how God rescued the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. God led them out, and under the leadership of Moses, they began a long journey to a land that God had promised them. We heard how God provided water and food for them because they had to travel through a very inhospitable environment. And they wouldn't have survived without God's help. Why was he helping these people? He was with them because he's a rescuer, a freedom fighter. He'd seen their misery in Egypt. He'd seen the injustice and cruelty of the slave masters. He'd heard their cries for help, and he was concerned about their suffering. So he came down to rescue them and lead them to a better place. In doing that, he was also keeping the promise that he'd made to Moses' ancestors, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. God had promised to make them into a great nation, a kingdom whose king was God, a nation different from all the others in that ancient world. It was going to be different because it was going to be fashioned according to the character of God. God loved them, and he wanted them to live in ways that showed that they loved each other. God was concerned for them, that they might live well and lead good, fruitful lives. There was to be no more slavery of any kind. And so there in the desert, near Mount Sinai, God gave them some instructions, a set of principles that set out what it means to love God and love other people. There were 10 guidelines designed to keep the people out of different kinds of slavery. It's an instruction manual that we call the 10 Commandments. God gave them to Moses, and Moses shared them with the people. So you'll find these words in Exodus chapter 20. We might ask, why are there 10? Do you ever use your fingers to remember things? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kathleen tells a story, or it's her experience. Her mother used to send her to the shop. That's for the bacon, that's for the cauliflower, that's for the carrots.
I was only 3 when she did that.
Okay, number 1. Here we go. Commandment number 1. Before he gives the first commandment, God reminds the people about who he is. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Now that's a summary. He had told Moses more. He said, I am the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet I will not leave the guilty unpunished. So that tells us something about God's character, quite a lot really. The first commandment is in verse 3 of Exodus 20. You shall have no other gods before me. Other gods? Surely there's just one God, isn't there? Well, that commandment is expanded in the second one. We'll have the second one. It says, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. The lands the Israelites were travelling through were inhabited by people who did have other gods. Well, they were idols, they were statues carved from wood and stone. And they'd sacrifice animals to them. They'd bow down to them. They'd pray to them and worship them. But these gods were just silent, powerless wood and stone. Moses' God, the only God who actually was able to do mighty works, the only God who was alive and could speak, he said, no, these gods are worthless. Don't have anything to do with them, because I alone am God. So don't make idols, don't value them, don't respect them, don't worship them. Worship the true God, the one who loves you and rescued you and provides for you. Give attention to him. Give your allegiance to him. Now, I don't have to tell you that many people today think God is not very important. Other things take priority in their lives. Things like sport, entertainment, food, fashion, even family. These things rule their lives and they replace God. Is your life being ruled or unduly influenced by something or someone that's not God? Is anything in your life competing with God? If so, you need to acknowledge it to God and ask for forgiveness, and then change your behaviour, because there's one God. Third commandment. It's also about God. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. A name stands for a character. When we use a person's name, we bring up a mental picture of who they are. To use a person's name in disrespectful or disparaging way is to disrespect a person. Sometimes when I was a child, my father was working on a difficult car engine job. I'd hear him say the name Jesus Christ. No, he wasn't praying. He was swearing. He was taking the Lord's name in vain. And therefore, he was guilty. He needed to be forgiven. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. And that's a good commandment, because if we keep it, it will help us to remember that God is holy. The fourth commandment is the longest, just because it has a lot of details, but the principle is simple. Work for 6 days and have a rest on the seventh, following God's example. And this is a good commandment too, because we need rest. We're not designed to work day after day after day without a break. But there are some people who take this commandment very literally and don't allow themselves to watch TV on a Sunday or do any cooking or even take photos. But it's silly to keep the Sabbath day so legalistically, because Jesus said the Sabbath was made for people, for our benefit, not people for the Sabbath. The Sabbath encourages us to recognise that God is the ultimate source of our identity and our purpose and our well-being. These first 4 commandments all relate to God. If we follow them, they enable us to honour God and give him first place in our lives. All those other things, our family, our work, our friends, our interests, our hobbies, etc., they're all resources given to us by God. Resources, but he is the source. And so he deserves to be given first place. The remaining 6 commandments tell us how to relate to human people, our family, our friends, our community. And these commandments are all summaries. They're principles that need to be unpacked to reveal their specific implications. Or we can see them as umbrellas that cover a variety of situations. We have to think, how do these commandments apply to us these days? Well, the fifth one says, honour your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. This commandment recognises that honouring parents and treating them respectfully promotes a healthy way of life. Of course, parents are not perfect. It's hard to think how we should honour parents if we know that they've mistreated us or abused us. But we can be thankful for them, that they gave us life. We can be thankful for any good things about them, like the helpful things they taught us. We must respect them for the special role they were given in our lives. I think we can all recognise deficiencies in our parents. But I also know that in many ways I haven't been an ideal father. I've needed to forgive my parents for some things, just as I'd like to be forgiven for my shortcomings. The sixth commandment, you shall not murder. Now, this commandment doesn't prohibit all kinds of killing. We kill animals for food. And even in the Old Testament stories, God sometimes commanded his people to kill their enemies. And that's different from murder, because murder usually arises from hate in one's heart. Here we have to listen to Jesus' words about this. He said, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you," said Jesus, "that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." So we need to be careful not to harbour a hateful attitude against anyone. So this is a good commandment, because if we keep it with all of its implications, we'll guard against resentment and bitterness, which can lead to hate and even violence. We believe that a human person is created in the image and likeness of God, and that means even before they're born. And so most Christians would see abortion as murder. The seventh commandment, you shall not commit adultery. Adultery is being unfaithful to the promises that a married couple makes. But this is an umbrella commandment that covers all kinds of sexual sin, all sexual activity that's outside of marriage or before marriage. So here again the words of Jesus about this. He said, "You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Lust has always been a big problem for the human race. But these days, it's so easy to access pornography on our phones or computers. It does us no good. In fact, it leads us into addiction, which is a form of slavery. And so we should avoid it. So this is a good commandment too, because if we keep it, we'll be guarding against relationship breakdowns and family breakups. Commandment number 8, you shall not steal. To steal is to take property that rightfully belongs to another person or group. It's a violation of justice. It includes cheating. We might take a little something and say to ourselves, no one will know that God sees and God knows. And also we need to think about how this might apply to robbing God by not giving to him what he expects from us. We have a responsibility to obey God, and if we don't, we're shortchanging him, stealing from him. The 9th commandment: you shall not give false testimony against your neighbour. And this covers lying and slander and gossip. Lying is a violation of a person's integrity, your own integrity. God never lies, but always operates in the truth. You can't trust a liar. Lying comes from the devil, who is the father of lies, the Bible says. What about gossip? Gossip is usually negative talking about someone else's faults behind their back, and it often stretches the truth. It almost always causes pain and humiliation for the person that's being talked about. It can ruin a person's reputation. People share gossip without any thought of how it might impact the person. So let's commit ourselves to loving our neighbours by telling the truth and respecting them. The last commandment, number 10, you shall not covet your neighbour's house. You shall not covet your neighbour's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbour. To covet means to have an excessive desire for something or someone. It really means that we're unsatisfied with what we have or with what we are. And that can lead to envy and jealousy and greed and even stealing. People who want more money can get hooked on gambling. Isn't it true that God has given us everything we need? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. If we do want something badly, we should take our request to God. Jesus summarised all these commands into just 2. So really I thought this was going to be a 10-point sermon, but really there are only 2 points. As a man came to Jesus and asked him, what is the most important commandment? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And there's a second one, love your neighbour as yourself. And the commandments tell us how to do those 2 things, to love God and love our neighbour. I'm going to read something that I read. I didn't write this, someone else did. There is a reason why the first 4 commandments have to do with our relationship with God, while the last 6 govern our relationship to our neighbours. The reason is that we simply cannot love our neighbours unless we love God first. A right relationship with our neighbour is simply the result of a right relationship with God. If I do not see my neighbour in relation to God, that is, as belonging to him, it's not long before I begin to love that person primarily for the sake of what he does for me. It's only when I see that person from God's point of view that I can love him for his own sake and not for my sake, because God has loved each person into existence for his own sake. Our love of neighbour will merely be an extension or an expression of our love for God. So if any of these commandments have raised issues for you, and if you feel that you need prayer about any of them, please seek out someone on the prayer team. That's me or Halia after the service, and we'll be happy to pray with you and for you. Amen. May God have the glory.